You're listening to Ed Nation with Dan and Chris on CastleRockRadio.com, and I wish I could have said this year was a catch-up time.
That's right.
But it is. Education is not boring these days. There is a lot to do, and we seem to get a lot of it done in the summer now.
Well, and I think the thing that's going to be great is as we're talking through this show, I hope our listeners will see the preparation that was necessary to get to the point we are with all the different mandates from the state and all the things that we're trying to do with our schools. But yeah, we both spent a lot of time organizing, planning, getting groups of people together to talk about initiatives.
If you think about the political landscape and their calendar and the legislative landscape, the national and local, you've got a lot of this stuff being determined from January through end of March. That's when all the legislatures come to get together and determine any new legislation. That's when the School Finance Act is settled, so we know how many dollars we have. That's normally when the national government looks at reauthorizations or waivers or whatnot, and we had quite a bit of that over the beginning of the 2013 school year.
Yeah, and we also had a lot of things that we implemented last year that were in anticipation of these things coming and kind of reading the tea leaves and saying, here's what we're going to be required to do in a couple years, so let's get started. And we had the opportunity, and take SITE, for example. We ran
our evaluation
through SITE last year, and then we went back, and I know you spent a tremendous amount of time with people looking back at what we did and how we could improve it.
Well, one of the core beliefs in Douglas County is that we want to tap the experts, and a lot of times that are the people in our buildings. And through the school year, between 7:30 and 4:30, they're doing their job. They're working with students, with each other in buildings. So if we want to tap our experts, we have to get them outside of that. Now, it's tough to pull a group of people together at 6 a.m. in the morning. So that's pretty much off the table. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of evening works. What's nice about the summer is we can actually pay those teachers, those experts in other areas classified, to come in and work during the middle of the day. Have a longer stretch of time, because working from 4:30 to 7:30, because everybody's got a family, everybody wants to get home, that's difficult. But working from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., you can get a lot of work done. And that is afforded to us during those summer days.
So last evening during the board meeting, too, I heard Dr. Johnson-Strother talk about all of the things they're doing with curriculum, and that out of the last 40 days, they've had 23 days of staff development that they were engaged in.
Yeah, that's the other side. Not just building, a lot of the stuff that we use within the district, but it's an opportunity to grow. I mean, to give dedicated time. So that 23 out of 40 days is kind of funny, but it's more true than funny. We had camps, science camps going on, where they brought in teachers by, spans of grade levels like K2 one day, 3-5 the next day, and so on, where they actually had a couple days in a row. They worked through a lot of this new science initiatives, a lot of the hands-on stuff that's available. And she's going to be joining us later. We can probably tap her at the kind of the halfway part of the show in terms of how that's gone. But we recognize that to be good at this, you have to keep evolving in this. It's not a destination to be highly effective as a teacher. Yeah. It's a journey. And highly effective one year is not necessarily highly effective the next, because so much changes. Think back, you and I were both teachers. The iPod, laptops, I mean, those weren't common devices, world-class tools that we could use.
Talk about cassette players.
Yeah. My Walkman was, big deal,
right.
But it was the size of, a Frisbee.
And the cell phone that looked like a brick.
Yeah. So, and we went from, just in terms of technology, we went from putting signs up in our hallways and on our front doors with a cell phone with a big red line through it, the no cell phone, to please, over the last year, please bring your technology. We will let you use it. Mm-hmm. We will encourage you to use it. And as a teacher, if you were a teacher when we were teaching, and you're a teacher still now, you've had to learn how to embrace it, how to encourage it, how to involve students in using it, and how to make it available so that kids have some personalization and some freedom to determine how they're going to demonstrate it using it.
So, kind of shift gears here. Let's kind of start the rundown on several of these items that our Colorado school districts must implement by 1314. I don't know if you remember when the whole discussion started about Senate Bill 191. It was not called Senate Bill 191. I think it was some kind of teacher effectiveness, something along those lines. Mm-hmm. But that discussion started like in 2007, 2008. I know it started in our district that early, and I'm assuming in the districts you were in that was the same kind of conversation, is look what's coming up. But I remember sitting there and thinking, wow, 2013, 2014, that's a long ways off.
Well, to go back even further, when No Child Left Behind, everybody was going to be proficient, 100% proficiency, every student in every school across the nation. Well, we thought, well, we got to do that by 2013, 14. Guess what?
Right.
We're here.
And so really what this school year is shaping up to be is a nexus between all these things that were planned and now they actually have to be implemented. I don't necessarily know that people were thinking about, oh, well, that's going to be in 13, 14, so why don't we make this in 14, 15? I don't think they were necessarily talking about that. They may have been, but it sure doesn't seem like it, because I have a list of 5 things here that I think would be best for us to kind of run down through these and say, what are they about and what are we doing in our district? So
yeah, because these are national, but every district in the country have to deal with them.
Right.
Some of them are specific to Colorado, but you and I have talked countless times on all the legislation in all the other states that mirrors exactly what's going on in Colorado.
And we have Dr. Strother Johnson and our newest executive chief academic officer will be coming in too. He's not coming in either?
No.
Just Dr. Johnson Strother. Okay.
We'll have to bring him in, though, because I kind of want to tap him on
I
air.
think that'd be great. So let's start on the first one, Educator Effectiveness Act. Basically, we've talked about this before, changes the way principals and teachers are evaluated based on a particular set of quality standards, what it means to be effective teacher or principal. Half of the educator's annual evaluation is based on student progress. That's what we're calling Site Standard 6.
Right.
We have Site Standard 1 through 5. You did a tremendous amount of work this summer. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, it's funny because I think a lot of people's impression of changing an evaluation and an implementation of a new evaluation, or any program for that, is always laborious. We actually wanted to get ahead of this because, believe it or not, 13-14 is the year it counts. So last year in 12-13, we rolled out the first part of it, the first half of it, which is that practitioner piece. And that's kind of the stuff that, traditionally teachers can identify with. It's, what do you want kids to know? How are you going to know it, that they know it? And what are you going to do to help teach them and then reteach them if necessary? And we use a lot of terms now around outcomes. That's what we want them to know. It's a high-level stuff. That's where the core curriculum, the Common Core, kind of gets incorporated in and then elevated in Douglas County. Assessment, you want to have something that we've talked for years, data driving instruction. But we want to make sure that we're measuring it authentically, that we're getting at what really matters through those assessments. And then, and we recognize that teachers are the drivers of this. And then the thing that's most common is that whole instructional practices. I made the joke about, my summer vacation, bringing the slides in and turning it into a writing exercise. We don't do that anymore. That's just backwards. We actually figure out what we want them to know, how we're going to measure it, and then we talk about how we're going to teach it in a way that's personalized and sustainable and engaging.
And transfers the learning to them. I mean, it goes back to that question of who's doing the work in the classroom.
So we rolled that out all last year. That was half of the evaluation that's expected by what you just quoted, the legislation that came down a few years ago. The second half is the Standard 6. It's 50%, and it's all student achievement growth data. So it's all the preparation and practice in the first part, and it's all performance in the second part. So we rolled out the first half last year. We're going to continue with that and add the second half. What's amazing is you and I get to talk to a lot of people in a lot of other districts, and they haven't even started this. We are fortunate in Douglas County to actually be ahead of it. We are actually building it as we go, not building it when it's due. It's kind of like doing your homework the night before. We all know how that turns out, and you and I have kids, so we were probably guilty as kids to do the science project.
I was going to say, I'm not going to push it off on my kids.
Well, it's how good is the science project that you start a month before and grow plants and seeds and things like that, versus when your kid comes home and says, "Dad, the science fair is tomorrow."
You break out the crayons and start drawing vegetables.
But we do, and this is across the country, not just in Colorado. Yeah. We have districts that are doing the science project the night before. They're doing the evaluation right now, and it means something. And we've talked about fairness. It's not fair to teachers and a measure, certainly when it's wrapped to tenure, and a lot of people are connecting it to pay like we are. it's a big plate.
Well, and I think the other place that this is going to be really interesting as this discussion forwards is, there's been several instances of schools and districts not necessarily being ethical about the use of this data or doing things with the data to make things be what they're not really. And we're going to bring up some of those a little bit later on when we start talking about Park. And, we have the Tony Bennett situation, and we have a story about AP testing. But I think this has great promise, but this also has great potential to be a huge issue if a district doesn't approach it in the right mindset. What I mean by that is if you go in with it with just one test being that, that becomes high stakes, and that's an opportunity for someone to go, oh my gosh, if I don't do well or my kids don't do well on this, it's going to have a horrible effect on me. Maybe not the students, but it's going to have a big effect on me. And I think from the very beginning, we've approached this with, is there a way we can present a balanced perspective so no one test outweighs all the other ones, but it also gives a context of this is a body of work that I've done over the course of a year. So that is a huge part of Standard 6. And Standard 6 is also for administrators, correct?
Yeah, we'll be rolling this out. We've developed, of course, the LEAD document. That's the kind of principal version of a teacher evaluation. We benchmarked it, kind of a goal-setting process at the end of last year, moving forward with it this year. So that'll be in place. We're going to have to be building the same thing because this effectiveness bill not only affects teachers, but affects principals. They're going to be developing it with teachers at the same time they're going to be building it for themselves.
And I think for purposes of this discussion today, I think the way that we had the opportunity to approach LEAD was possibly a little more productive than the way that we approached SITE. And I think that was because of timing.
It really was.
We got the information in last July and had to have a teacher evaluation tool, and that what we were given didn't measure up to what we wanted it to. We had all year to work with principals and other administrators around LEAD and have some honest and thoughtful discussions about what that might look like and what we're going to do.
You have to make some decisions and prioritize some things.
Right.
And we have 3,400 plus teachers in the district. We have 200 administrators. So where do you put your efforts if it's going to be most impactful? We wanted to make sure we got something in front of teachers a year ahead so that they had a chance to use it and then refine it. And that's what we did this summer, bringing in those teachers, looking at refining that instrument, making it better so that in its second year of implementation, it's even stronger.
Well, and by the way, the SITE document was available, the general SITE document, middle part of September last year, I believe.
Yeah.
And then the others that were derivatives of that we were going in and assessing PE teachers and counselors and library media, those followed, and those took a little more time to develop. Our goal this year is by the time school starts, for the majority of our schools, because we have some that are already in, but by this time next week, we should be sitting here with all of these evaluation tools set to go, SITE and LEAD.
Yeah, you were talking at the beginning of the show, back to school. We're pretty fortunate. We got 4 schools already started, believe it or not, in the first full week of April. And by the second full week of August, by the second full week of August, every one of our schools will be in session.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that presents some challenges, but that's also some great opportunities. I think one of the challenges around the calendar is people remember what it was like when they were kids. And it seemed like you started after Labor Day and you were out before Memorial Day. In our district, everyone wants to start late, everyone wants to end early, and everybody still wants to have fall break, winter break, spring break.
Yeah,
Can't do that.
That comes to about 60 days of school.
That's right.
Hey, when we come back, I want to talk about some of the prep programs that go into this.
Absolutely. We'll be there.
All right, you're listening to Ed Nation on CastleRockRadio.com.
Welcome back to Castle Rock Radio. This is Dan and Chris, and this is Ed Nation. Glad you could join us this Wednesday afternoon. We're back live after a summer of work, which was good. We got a lot of opportunities to work on the things that we worked on last year and further refine those. But you had some interesting information that you found that kind of broke this summer around teacher preparation programs, Chris. And
yeah, we were just talking about the Colorado law that requires teachers and principals to be evaluated by 50% their practice and then 50% by student performance. At such a high level, it's interesting. I've got some data here on a kind of a what it is. The National Council on Teacher Quality reviewed 2,400 teacher education programs. Primary analysis was on course material, so I'll get to that in a second. But because the programs were unwilling to cooperate, They had to just use what they could access in terms of what's taught. And they found some generalizations that were kind of startling. And you can give it its merit or not. But they contend that only a small number of teacher education programs nationally are designed so that new teachers are adequately prepared. Yet, we're holding them, like in Colorado, to this very high new law standard.
Well, and I think that's one of the challenges. I mean, as we were off air, I kind of referenced how many other professions are you automatically given the keys to the Rolls Royce and you're all of a sudden driving it? I mean, what other profession would you walk in and be expected to perform at the highest level right out of the gate as a 22-year-old college graduate? Not too many.
No.
I mean, you're not going to be the president of a bank walking out of a business program. You're not going to be, you name it. But in our profession, you walk in and immediately you have a classroom of students that you're responsible for getting from point A to point B in a really highly measured and under the gun situation now with education the way it is.
So one of the things they cite in here is they point to low rigor criteria to get into these programs, that it's not a rigorous program to get into. One of the other things they point to here that's very interesting is the graduate level programs. So to become a teacher, you go through a preparation program. You could do it either as an undergraduate or at a master's level, a graduate level, if you got an undergraduate in something else. So there's two kind of ways to do this. They found that higher level, that graduate level program, were said to do a much poorer job than the undergraduate level.
So, but here's the good news about that is in my perspective, we shouldn't even really care. Because those schools that do the best job, and if we're doing a good job of attracting people, we have the ultimate power of hiring or not hiring those people. We don't have to accept people. So maybe we should kind of frame this in what kind of criteria should we be looking for as we're hiring people that would get the best qualified people, and whatever they want to do. I mean, if there's enough people that are going through a program that can't find a job at the end of it, how long is that program going to last?
Yeah, that's a great one. I think one of the things, and I said at the beginning, this was, the people, the programs weren't willing to work with this survey, with this group. So they did it basically on paper. One of the responses was, and I love this, it's like doing a restaurant review by only looking at the menu and not eating the food.
Right. That's perfect. That's exactly right. And I think that's one of the things that we could go off of this year too is I think our principals have a pretty good idea which teacher preparation programs we're getting the best qualified candidates from.
Yeah.
And maybe what we should do is look at the teachers that we hired right out of college. Who were those people? Where did they come from? What's the best programming? And make some connections. I've heard this through our building principals, mostly high school building principals, but I've heard that Metro State is doing a great job with their teacher preparation. So what is it about Metro State that's getting the attention of our principals, the people that are actually working with these teachers in the classroom? And if that's the place, is there a way that we can connect closer to them?
Exactly.
And pull the other people along? Adams State has a program, UNC has a program, Western State Colorado has a program. I think a lot of schools have teacher education programs. I just don't know where we're getting them all from.
Well, and I think with such a high level of accountability that now is on teaching and administrating, that we want to help these programs. We want to make sure that teachers coming into the industry across the nation are prepared and ready adequately for these expectations. I remember reading at some point, no matter what industry you work in, there's always a necessity for an employer to invest in that new hire. We certainly do through induction, through a lot of new teacher orientation, things like that. I remember reading that Pepsi, I think, does $17,000 of onboarding in the first year. That's how much they invest in the success so they keep that person. I would imagine with all the PD and all the time devoted to our new staff and our mentoring and all the things that go on with induction, that we invest a great deal of dollars, no matter where they come from, to make sure that they are successful, because we can't afford anyone to not be successful.
Well, but you also saw the data last night. I think the average years of experience was close to 5 years of experience on the people we hired this year. And how many was that? 411, I believe, was the number.
Yeah, something over
somewhere in there. So, it's not like we're hiring all first-year teachers. And really, I leave it up to the principal. They're in the best control of what their school needs, and I have not heard one principal say, "I haven't found the perfect candidate for this job."
Yeah.
I don't think our principals are settling for teachers. I think what they're doing is they're picking the best qualified person.
Which is interesting because we did hear that a couple of years ago, that we were reposting that we weren't able to find people in the first go around, and we did not get that this year.
Yeah, I have heard no principal say I had to settle for a teacher. In fact, I've heard the exact opposite, where I got some great teachers this year.
Yeah, and it's a good problem to have. So, all right.
That's really interesting, though, that all of those things came. There was like 4 or 5 articles just boom, boom, boom about teacher preparation programs and the lack of rigor and the lack of people being prepared. I'm also wondering if, maybe the whole conspiracy theory. Why did this all of a sudden happen? What's the tool that they're using to assess the quality of the teacher? And again, if I go to school and I become an attorney, I don't walk in and become a partner right out of the gate. I don't walk in and become a lead physician right off the point. But in our profession, you do.
Yeah, and like I said, this new law in Colorado, the Senate bill that's requiring teacher effectiveness, that's for everybody, whether you were in your first year or you're in your 34th year.
So another one of these directives that the Colorado school districts must implement in 1314 is the school readiness requirement. I'm not really familiar with that one, being the secondary assistant superintendent. So I hope you are. And I know you've probably been tracking this, because I know we have had discussions about preschool and kindergarten students. Tell us a little bit about where that's at.
Well, in Colorado, we've had a Basic Literacy Act for a while, and it had 5 components, phonics, phonemic awareness, vocabulary comprehension, etc. These things, as time goes by, they ultimately get replaced, and the READ has replaced this moving forward. And it started out with as a mandatory retention bill for grade 3 students that weren't reading at grade level. That mirrored what already exists in Florida. Florida has some mixed kind of data on that. When you have a hard and fast line like that, you take the student-determined decision out of it. That's not what's best for kids. You really can't have a one-size-fits-everyone kind of policy. And I think as they delved into this, they realized that probably wasn't going to get any support from a lot of the districts. The districts like local control. They're like personalizing these sort of determinations. They don't want to mandatorily retain anybody. They want to make those decisions in partnership with parents. So it evolved into what you have is this Reading Act. Now, there was another thing that used to be, if you weren't at grade level by, grade 3, you'd be put on an ILP, an individual literacy plan. So this READ plan kind of takes that over. So anyone who's on an ILP, that will continue for as long as the student needs it, but it will be phased out at the discretion of most districts. The READ Act is focusing on that early childhood initiative of getting kids reading by that grade 3 time and making sure that there's a plan in place by then, not from then on, but before they get to grade 3. Right. So it's a little more proactive. It's a little more, let's address it. Now, one of the things that is used very widely in Colorado is response to intervention, RTI. This looks a lot like that. This is a documented plan to make sure that we have every student getting the services they need by doing very strategic, specific diagnostic evaluations of reading deficiencies, attacking those in terms of learning strategies and putting in interventions appropriate to get them to that point by the time they're there.
So we're really lucky in Douglas County because the proficiency level, at least demonstrated on TCAP, is very, very high in our lower grades. And even up into our middle school and high school grades, I think, I was reviewing those today, I think 75, 80%, sometimes 85% of the students are at a proficient or advanced level at the highest level, which is 10th grade.
Yeah, I was having a conversation earlier today with Cinnamon Watson, who's our public informations officer, communications officer in the district, and she reminded me that last year we had the highest reading of any district as measured by TCAP, which was just one measure, but that's very public measure in the whole state of Colorado.
Yeah, and I think, at the high school level, we're in some places approaching 90%. So when you take that cohort of students, we're not talking about a lot of students, but what it does do, and I noticed this when I was a high school assistant principal and principal, a lot of times the students that struggle with reading, they have a hard time acquiring in other areas of the curriculum. So it's not as easy as pulling them out and doing a a pull-out intervention program, because really they need to be able to operate within the context of that class. So I'm sitting in a science classroom. It doesn't help me to do basic reading skills. What I really need is how can I access information in that text? And so that was one of the things.
And then
that
transfer it and apply it and
Exactly.
synthesize it and use
Absolutely.
it creatively.
And we really tried to do a lot of intervention around that, around working with students within the context of a class. I like this because I have always believed if a student is reading on grade level at third grade, they're going to have a lot better chance moving through our system. So when we come back, we still have 3 other items we were going to talk about, and we have Dr. Strother Johnson is with us. Dr. Johnson Strother, I'm sorry, she's laughing at us, but you're listening to Castle Rock Radio and Ed Nation with Dan and Chris.
And we're back. You're listening to Ed Nation with Dan and Chris on CastleRockRadio.com. And we have friend of show, the good doctor, Dr. Strother Johnson Strother, however you want to do it. Our chief academic officer, last year working with elementary, this year moving on up.
Hey, what else are you going to do?
So she's working with secondary. Now, we've been talking about several of the initiatives that have kind of come across statewide or been legislatively required mandates. We certainly talked about the teacher effectiveness bill and applied it to the principals as well. We've talked about the READ Act, and we are moving on down the list.
Okay.
So what's the next item on the list? School readiness requirements.
Now, this requires districts to ensure that all public preschool and kindergarten students receive an individual school readiness plan. The districts must also perform school readiness assessments. How do you react to this, and what's your thought about making it a successful in not just our district, but statewide?
How to make the school readiness requirements successful? Well, one, I think you obviously need somewhat of a litmus test when kids come in to know how we can help them improve and grow in literacy. So I think that would be most helpful. And the second part of your question was?
Well, I think it's not just us that have to make
True.
this successful, but it's across the state. I'll tell you, one of my pet peeves
Yes.
is, it's one of those situations where you come into a district or you come into a new classroom or new school, and we're talking about some preschool kids, and the very first day you go, "Hi, young Billy, how you doing? Go sit at this table and write this test."
Right. Not the way to start off the school year, in my opinion. I think we need to get kids, especially at that young age, used to routine and attending school, and that school is fun, not all about assessments. And so then how can we weave in appropriate assessments that give us the data we need, but still allow the kids to enjoy school? I mean, we need to have kids enjoy school PK-12, in my opinion. But we also know that we have to get data. So how can we do it in a usable but fun way so that kids at that age don't dread coming to school, especially on the first day?
You know what I think is amazing is we're talking about very young students here. It's never really the student who's got issues or anxiety or separation concerns. It's always the parent. And they're the ones that are phoning the schools and talking to the principals and saying, all right, well, I just don't know if my child is ready. Is this going to help change that?
I don't know that it's going to help with the anxiety issues. Who knows why a parent says, I don't know if my child is ready. It might be because they aren't ready, but it could truly be that maybe they feel their child isn't going to be successful in the academic areas when going to school. So I think it's our job to help the parent realize that, hey, kids come in at all different levels. It's okay. Kids can still be successful, but they're also going to come to school and they're going to have fun while learning.
All right, I'll tell you. Let's hit the next topic. Okay, you ready?
Perfect.
All right, now, and I'm going to lump the next two together. Okay, Dan?
Okay.
We get this all the time, and I am blue in the face for trying to explain it. But there's the question around Colorado adopted the Common Core, one of 46 states. Colorado has their own academic standards, and we as a district have our own curriculum with the GVC.
Yes.
How do you, in I guess the 14-floor elevator speech, if posed with that question, try to help the community at large understand how they're connected and what we do here?
So the Common Core is what nationwide people have said, this is what we feel is best for students. That's why you have 46 states that have adopted it for math and reading in particular. Colorado, as well as many other states, have said, we're going to take the Common Core, but we're going to add to, because we feel there's other things that are also appropriate. For example, Colorado history, for 4th grade, I believe.
Yes.
So those are some additions. So the Colorado academic standards are inclusive of the Common Core, but have some additions that Colorado have felt are necessary for students in this state. The world-class outcomes, part of the Guaranteed and Viable Curriculum for Douglas County, used the Common Core and the Colorado academic standards as the foundation, because we saw in many areas that all the Common Core and Colorado academic standards were asking of kids at certain levels was application when you look at it in terms of Bloom's taxonomy.
Which is a very low level of understanding.
I think it's the 3rd or 4th level, yeah. Because you start
Remember.
with remember. Yes. So
Like the blue spruce is the Colorado State tree, which I learned in 4th grade at
Absolutely.
Hackberry Hill Elementary School in Nevada.
there
And the
you
capital
go.
of Wyoming is...
Don't know because I was in Colorado.
So therefore, we felt in Douglas County that we wanted our kids to have higher cognitive levels of complexity.
We want them to be able to think.
Yes, we do. That would be good for our kids to have to think. So we wanted to ensure that kids are working at that evaluate and create level of Bloom's taxonomy. So we took the foundation of Colorado academic standards and Common Core, and we bloomed them, so to speak. We said, okay, here's what it's asking on Bloom's. How can we make it more rigorous? So our world-class outcomes go beyond the Colorado academic standards and the Common Core. So to say that kids will not be successful because we're not teaching it isn't necessarily true. We are going beyond it because we want that for our kids in order for them to leave our walls being successful individuals.
So how does this live in our classrooms? I mean, I think last night it really became clear to me, crystal clear, hearing those 3 teachers talk at the Board of Ed meeting. You know, hearing one teacher talk about how they've taken the GVCs for their particular area, and they've expanded those to talk about what kind of careers would this involve, or connected
Right.
it to higher education.
Right.
Or the civilizations example.
Yeah,
that was a great
that was
one.
So
outstanding.
instead of when you teach ancient civilization, instead of teaching the minutia pieces of, so what happened when
Roman,
Rome,
Greeks, right?
that she compared it about civilizations is all about systems and systems
Right.
failing and systems succeeding, and then bringing in Detroit, for
Yeah,
example.
and I almost
Perfect.
I
jumped
thought that was
in.
really appropriate, Chris.
You know, I
What did you
consider
say?
myself, from Detroit most days.
Yes.
So when she said, why do civilizations fail like Detroit? I was like, oh man,
But absolutely appropriate for
Right.
today's students and relevant.
absolutely.
Well, and because it's transferable too, and
Yes.
that was the other piece that one of them talked about, was being able to use this in one class, but then
Yep.
transfer it to another content and
Yes.
curriculum, which was, I mean, they embodied what we've been talking about
Yes.
for a year and a half now, maybe more than that. Maybe I've only been
and
involved
who
that
could
long. but-
who could not identify with that? She teaches ancient
Right.
civilizations. Who could not
So
identify
when you
with
talk
that
about
example?
systems succeeding or failing, think of how many different content areas you can use that same world-class outcome.
Exactly.
I can't think of one you can't.
Well,
Absolutely, and that is the strength, I think, of our curriculum. And research shows the more kids can transfer what they learn from one content to another, the more that they can master it, and they see the connections. So
And
that's
this
what's key.
is a perfect segue into the article that was sent in to us, came in on our tip line, but from one of our listeners. It's about an AP exam controversy in Mills High School in California. Okay, so these students take the AP exam, and they mailed their results into ETS, and ETS accuses them of cheating on these exams because they didn't follow protocols. So there's a big lawsuit coming out of this school.
well, they invalidated all
They
those
invalidated
tests.
there was like 436, attorneys for 300 outraged Mills High School students invalidated 634 tests in July after they found that they had violated ETS rules. What did they violate?
What rule was that, Dan?
They were sitting at square tables, so they were facing each other. They weren't all facing one direction.
Wow.
So, but it gets better.
Okay.
So this is,
This is lunacy.
the district has acknowledged that some students were seated facing each other. So they acknowledge that they didn't follow the rules, but they want them to grade these tests and get those scores off to colleges. So,
But just to go over that one more time, because I think Dan's going to finish this up with some more details. But the tests were invalidated because they sat at square tables.
right, they were
I
facing
thought
each
I
other.
heard him right the first time, but
Yes.
thank you for clarifying.
Sat at square tables. So, but here was one of the possible fixes for this is ETS scheduled free retests for the students from August 9th through 19th. So I think both sides are being a little,
So they gave them a chance to redo the test
That's right.
in rows facing forward.
but some students don't plan on taking them because they either won't be available, number one, or number two, and this goes back to what you were talking about, they fear they will do poorly without adequate time to review the material. So is this learning that sticks?
No.
There we go.
Absolutely not. And I think there's also research out there that shows there's this controversy out there about AP courses that many times students who take AP courses, take the test, maybe don't get college credit, go to college and aren't necessarily successful in the areas in which they took AP classes because they teach it so traditionally. It doesn't mean that what they're learning isn't worth learning. It's the way in which they're having to learn it, which is mostly memorization.
Yeah.
So I'm going to boast on one of our teachers. Last night, one of the teachers at the board meeting is actually an AP chemistry teacher.
Yes.
And he said that what we're doing has taken him to this place where he's taken the AP curriculum, and it's rigorous. There's no question about that.
Absolutely.
But he's connecting it to real world and to higher education. So he is going beyond and above with his own versions here, which I think is outstanding. I just thought this was really interesting.
So just to finish this GVC conversation, we, of course, have a lot of electives. How many courses do we have in a catalog?
I'm just going to guess around 9,000.
So how is it possible for you and your team to actually deliver a GVC for each one of these?
That's what we're being tasked with this year. Because some of those courses haven't been taught in years. And
okay, so some housekeeping to go with this.
So there's definitely some housekeeping that we need to. We've already started going through and looking at the classes that haven't been taught for 3 years or more.
So just to give the people that are listening an idea, what would be like a course catalog for a school system of 65,000 students like we are? What would be a realistic number if you detailed all the classes?
That's a pretty good question.
We don't know. We don't know yet.
No, my goal would be to siphon it down to at least half.
Okay.
But with teacher input, that kind of thing. But we had 400 classes that have not been taught in 3 years or more.
Well, and some of those classes are like something was named accelerated or honors, and we haven't taught it in the past because it's morphed into something else, or there's been a replacement course. I'm just thinking at the high school level, I know there's probably 1,000 of those classes easily, maybe 2,000 of the 9,000 that are classes that have not been used in the last 3, 5, 7 years.
So it doesn't mean we're taking courses away from teachers.
No.
We're just trying to clean it up and streamline it a little bit.
Well, and the other challenge is we have to align that with NCAA.
Yes.
So
you're going through your closet and getting rid of your bell-bottom pants.
I'm
unless
hoping
they
there
still
are no
fit,
bell-bottoms,
unless they still fit and look good, and then we might keep them, but
maybe
put them toward this.
Pants.
The nostalgia ones, the suit you got married in, and everything else goes.
I got married in a dress, but yes, I get it.
Well, I think that's one of the challenges is as we were building things, it just kept going and going and going, and nobody went back and went into there and said, well, do we really teach this anymore? No, we don't, so we're not going to have it. The other thing is that a lot of those courses have been either semester courses, quarter courses. Some of them are S1 versus S2 when you could just say, this is the course. You can add it whenever you want to. It doesn't have to have an S1 in front of it. So
the whole goal is
semester
to make this more efficient and usable for high schools.
Absolutely.
Right.
All right, we're going to go to our last break, but when we come back, I want to quickly hit the park assessment that's rolling out. The Good Doctor, hopefully you will stay with us for a little bit longer.
We still got our quick hits.
Where else would I go?
And we will finish with quick hits, and you got to jump in.
All right,
All right, you're listening to Ed Nation with Dan and Chris and The Good Doctor on ednation.com. Oh, no, CastleRockRadio.com.
That's right.
All right, we're back.
Welcome back to Castle Rock Radio. This is Ed Nation with Dan and Chris and the Good Doctor today. Had a little technical difficulty. I think the hamster wasn't running fast enough there to get that music going, huh?
It was on 33.
All right, so we've kind of had this pentagon of pain going on today about the directives from to Colorado school districts.
The pentagon of pain.
Actually, I think there's 6 now that I count them, though, and I don't know what 6 is.
Well, we put 2 together, so
okay, that's
Fist of
true.
Fury.
So the pentagon of pain, and you know, I just think it's been a real challenge for school districts to implement this stuff. It's all coming together on 1 year. Thankfully, we've had an opportunity to plan out a lot of this stuff and do some test runs on a lot of it. But the one that's coming up that's going to be interesting, it doesn't necessarily hit this year, but there's going to be a lot of planning around that, is PARC.
Yeah.
So what does PARC stand for, Dr. Cutter?
It stands for the Partnership for Assessment of Readiness for College and Career.
And what is the purpose of PARC?
Well, every state has state assessments. In Colorado, they're TCAP, and the T stands for transitional. So they've gone from what they used to use, knowing they're heading towards PARC. I think Colorado's one of 21.
Yeah, it's District of Columbia and U.S. Virgin Islands are added to 19, and like we said, we're happy to go be emissaries at the U.S. Virgin Islands to help with implementation.
It is the least we can do.
I think so.
So it is going to be what's supposed to be a better, higher level, more engaging, higher. We were talking about blooms before break. It's got to be more of that evaluate and that synthesize, and hopefully some creation. The utopian dream is that there's simulations involved with this, and there's a lot of opportunity
That'd
for
be
students.
fabulous, like power in your pocket.
Like power in your pocket.
So was this what happened in Kentucky this last spring, though, where did they use a version of Park? And
No, but what they did is they changed the test to reflect the Common Core.
Okay.
And they went from 70% in reading to 40%.
Okay.
Statewide. So, so they didn't have the new tool, they just had the new standards. This is going to be both.
And I think that's going to be one of the challenges of implementation is where's that threshold where people go, oh my gosh, things aren't working.
Well, we have spent the last 3 years preparing for this. We have created GVCs, which we talked about the last quarter, around helping kids do that. We have an evaluation that has expectations for teachers to use strategies such that they get to that personalization, that higher level with kids. I mean, we are doing everything we possibly can ahead of this, so that when it does roll out in 14-15.
With online testing.
It's funny. I've got a little article here real quickly that, of course, they have the summative pieces just like it, but they also have some non-summative components, looking at different things like for grades 2 to 8, test of speaking and listening skills, assessment activities designed to gauge skills like kindergarten and first grade, all those other things that are going to come along with Park. They've now actually said, well, it won't be ready for 14-15. It'll be ready for 15-16. So...
I think this is really interesting from the standpoint that we started this conversation out with talking about sight and lead and Standard 6, and Park is going to become the TCAP portion of Standard 6, correct?
Yep.
And so another way I think that we're going to have the opportunity to at least look at that realistically about those results are we're going to have other assessments that are a part of that are developed by our teachers, developed by our district, taken from other places, but we're going to use a balanced assessment system as opposed to one test, the Park. So that may help this as well. Do you know anything about how our GVCs are going to align with Park? Have you seen any test items from Park, or do we know?
We have been. Some of our coordinators have started working on that, especially around math and looking at how our GVCs will help students be successful. So that's another thing that we're doing this year. We're making sure that what are the items or what are some test questions on Park, and where does that fall as far as what our GVCs are asking? I will say, typically, summative assessments are very hard to reach those higher level blooms because it is hard to write a question around evaluate or create. So I'm interested to see what kind of data we get out of that as we're matching it up and looking at the alignment.
Well, and perhaps they'll take a lead from PISA testing as well, and we've had a couple schools involved with that, and I think that was great information for Andy Abner and Corey Wise last year, and I think Chuck Pugh at Ponderosa and Jerry Goings up at Highlands Ranch are doing some things with PISA this year. So we have an opportunity to go and talk with a person this fall and taking Corey and Andy, that's Rock Canyon and Legend High School, respectively, but they've had a little bit of experience with measuring their school against an international group or a national level group. And I think that's what this is really going to come down to. We're going to be measuring all across the United States now with 19 different states. So, wow, that was a conversation killer. That made you guys really excited about Park.
So nodding on radio is not a good way to respond to you, huh?
Yeah, no. So let's go with the quick hits, Dr. Cutter.
Some of these, they're going to get quicker as we go along. Here's one to share, and you guys can chime in. So for those of you who don't know Tony Bennett,
Singer?
No.
Not the singer.
So Tony Bennett was the Commissioner of Education in Illinois. He put a lot of things in place, was one of the early adopters to several of the things we talked about, ran into some trouble, did not get reelected. And it's an elected position, actually. There was a teacher who ran against him and won it. Well, an open spot in Florida's Commissioner of Education came up, and that state board, who gets to pick it, it's not a voted bin, brought him in. Well,
Brought Tony Bennett in.
Yeah, poor Tony Bennett. He's out of a job again. So this time, for kind kind of a core request, Freedom of Information Act. They got some emails, and it turns out that he went back and changed some grades for schools in his position. So
I could see how that could be troublesome.
So Florida's looking for a commissioner of education again, if either of you are interested in applying.
I'm good.
I'm good where I'm at. Thank you.
Taking it down to the next level. This one just astonishes me. A Connecticut state judge ruled last month that Paul Vallas,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's French.
Okay, Vallas, the superintendent of Bridgeport schools, must step down because he didn't complete a state-mandated leadership program. He's the superintendent of schools, 21,000 in Bridgeport. However, he has been the superintendent of a recovery school district in Louisiana, Chicago, and Philadelphia. But he's not good enough to be superintendent in Connecticut?
Because he did not complete a leadership program?
That's right. He's not qualified, they say.
Huh. That's really interesting, but we do that all the time with students. That similar thing. You don't get this grade or you don't graduate because you didn't take this specific class, when in fact, they may have already had the skills necessary to perform. From what you just read right there, it sounds like this person has been a superintendent, understands what it is to be a superintendent, has been successful, and he gets stripped because he didn't take a course.
Maybe he didn't take the state test.
Well, just so you know, he's not going anywhere, and his school board is standing by him, and they're fighting it in a lawsuit.
Good for them.
All right, so
I like that.
There was a commission, and this is where I want to emphasize. There was a commission of prominent education leaders. All right, prominent education leaders to talk about digital learning. They came up with a 5-point plan. The 5-point plan isn't what I want to focus on. Let's talk about who these prominent educational leaders are. Okay, first of all, president of Columbia's University with no education background other than being president of the university. Okay, that's one. Not bad, right? I mean, by association, right?
Okay.
I mean, okay. Next one, co-founder of TPG Capital Marketing.
He's been in a school.
Yeah, he went to school. All right, wait.
I think that's all that you need.
So, how about Chief Executive Officer for Common Sense Media?
Okay.
All right, so...
We're following you.
All right, prominent educational leaders.
Right, exactly.
And last but not least, Margaret Spellings, former U.S. Secretary of Education, except... her only educational background is she was president of PTO in Texas.
Wow.
Are they inviting Tony Bennett to be a part of that group too?
I hear he's available.
Wow.
All right, next. You ready? So you've heard of the Next Generation Science Standards?
Yes.
What do you think of them?
I think they're an improvement towards what we are asking of students.
Well, I'll tell you who doesn't like them. It's the Thomas B. Fordham Institute, a Washington think tank. Last month, they gave the standards a C. And what's even more condemning is they said states are better off looking elsewhere.
Well, I have to say I'm not someone that would say that anything that's standardized asks the most of kids, but I think they are an improvement from what was there.
All right, this can go in our duh category. 2/3 of teachers polled in a recent survey said they spend at least a month reteaching students after they return from summer vacation.
Yes. And I think that speaks to what we've been talking about for at least a year and a half, about this whole notion of sustainable learning. The whole thing we brought out with the AP testing. If you have students that are coming back after break and you feel like they don't have the information, what is it that we're not doing that's helping them retain that information?
Two more. Students who used mathematics programs in a blended online learning and in-class for algebra significantly improved their performance. They tested followed more than 17,000 students, and they found that while the first year showed no significant results, continued use of this program in the second year was an 8 percentile point difference.
Doesn't surprise me.
Doesn't surprise you.
Not in the least. I mean, think about the opportunities. They're motivated, number one. Yep. They get immediate feedback.
Yep.
They're finding out information about where they can improve very quickly. It makes perfect sense to me.
And last but not least, this was an estimate according to the 2013 NSSEA Retail Market Awareness Study. How much, and I'm taking guesses, do you consider that teachers spend total on classroom products every year?
Ooh.
Out of their own pocket?
No, I'll get to that one. Just
Just
total.
total?
Including what they spend on behalf of schools. Just teachers.
$1,500 per teacher.
That's actually a total amount for the nation.
Okay. How many teachers are there in a nation times 1,500?
I heard there would be no math.
The answer is $3.2 billion a year. Now, of that $3.2 billion, how much do you think a teacher spends out of their own pocket? How much of that is just the teachers?
Per teacher?
No. Overall, how much of the $3.2 million is out of teachers' pockets?
3.1.
Wait, I thought you said billion.
$3.2 billion. How much is out of teachers' pockets?
I'm going to say 3 of the 3.2.
1.6 billion, half of it.
So half of it.
Yeah,
Wow.
doesn't
Half of
surprise
the
me.
money spent by teachers is out of their own pocket every year. And that's important to know, knowing that all school will be in session by the end of this month.
Thanks for joining us on Castle Rock Radio. This has been Ed Nation. We are so excited for this school year. We got great teachers, great students, and a great school district. Thanks for joining us.
And down the same old strip, I gotta find a new place where the kids are hip.